נסתובב, נשתה קפה על מעקה, ניתן לרוח ללטף, ניתן ליום להתחלף. בוא נלך בכפכפים כשהאצבע תכוון, כי היום גם החיים הם עוד שיר שמתנגן כמו איזה יום יפה. בוא נעצור את השעון ונחיה ביום יפה כמו ביומנו הראשון. איזה יום יפה. בוא נסתובב מחוף לחוף, כי ליום כזה יפה לא ניתן סתם לחלוף. בוא נפתח את הרדיו, נגביר את הווליום לתקרה, ביום של חופש שכזה הסוף הוא רק ההתחלה. אז נרקוד עד אור הבוקר בין עשרות האנשים, כי לא עולים בכלל ביוקר דברים קטנים שמשמחים כמו איזה יום יפה. בוא נעצור את השעון ונחיה ביום יפה כמו ביומנו הראשון. איזה יום יפה. בוא נסתובב מחוף לחוף, כי ליום כזה יפה לא ניתן סתם לחלוף. ונחיה ביום יפה כמו ביומנו הראשון. בוא ונחייך, נשכח לרגע כל דבר, כי ביום כזה יפה כל מתחיל הכל נגמר. איזה יום יפה. בוא נעבור את השעון ונחיה ביום יפה כמו ביומנו הראשון. בוא נסתובב מחוף לחוף, כי ליום כזה יפה לא ניתן סתם לחלוף. בוא נעבור את השעון.
Is everybody here? Raise your hand if you're not here. Great. Okay, I'm going to start. Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is David Robinov. I am thrilled to be the national co-chair of Jewish National Fund USA Real Estate Division. My daytime job is with Ackman Ziff, where I am a finance and investment sales managing director. I want to welcome the real estate and finance professionals from all across the United States who have joined our program today. JNF USA, like the people of Israel, remains resolute in its response to those that are threatening to eliminate the only Jewish state in the world. Okay, fun fact, JNF is roughly 50 years older than the state of Israel herself. We have been planting trees in Israel for over 120 years. Our roots, pun intended, go back to 1901 when Theodore Herzl re-energized our Zionist movement. And because of all of the generous support from all of you, JNF is still here in 2024, stronger and more determined than ever to build, maintain, and support our land of Israel for Jewish people everywhere. So on behalf of Jewish National Fund, USA Real Estate and Finance Divisions, I want to express our collective appreciation to each of you in our community for your continued generosity and commitment to the land and people of Israel. With that, and you'll see the land and people of Israel behind me, or at least the land from a mission that I took to celebrate Israel 75. This is down in Sde Boker near the south. I am super excited that we all get the opportunity to listen to the wisdom and wit of our keynote speaker, Dr. Elliot Eisenberg. I will introduce him shortly, but first, a few words from Bruce Weininger, who is the new National Finance for Israel Chair. I'm throwing it to you, Bruce.
Thanks, David. Appreciate the introduction and the chance to lead the National Finance Group for JNF. My wife, Jill, and I have been involved with JNF for close to 25 years. When I'm not doing something related to trying to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship, I'm a I'm a principal at Kovitz Investment Group, a registered investment advisor based in Chicago. And my wife, Jill, and I split our time between Chicago and Park City, Utah. With that, back to you.
Okay. According to my program here, not sure if I'm up next, but I'll jump in. I think that Adam Lipkin is going to pick up the mic for a few seconds and talk about the Miami real estate division. And Adam looks muted, unfortunately. Adam, yeah, rewind. There you go. Rewind and start again. Thank you. Now press play.
Good to be here with all of you, those of you remote and everybody here. We're having a watch party down here in the beautiful Hilton Aventura down here in Miami, Florida. And I'm the co-chair of the Miami Real Estate Division. I've been a board member of JNF for several years now. I feel really honored to have gotten involved with the organization. You know, one thing that's very special what JNF does is builds communities in Israel. And one thing that I found very interesting when you think about it, over 80% of the population in Israel lives in less than 20% of the land, that small triangle between Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa. And so there's so much that needs to be developed for housing solutions that could be more affordable. And JNF has been so instrumental in this area in building communities and everything that goes with it to really build in the north and the south to be able to really fulfill on the mission to bring over 1 million people in these communities. And never in my lifetime, in our lifetimes, has there been more of a crisis than over the last year. And when you think about I think it's nearly 140,000 between the south and the north evacuees. I think the number was 90,000 evacuated in the north for over a year now, out of their homes, out of their communities. How important it is to be able to play a role here. And JNF is not new in these communities. And what you need more than anything is trust from people that have been providing resources and helping. And so I feel especially proud that JNF has done so much to help make sure that the right resources are coming to the right communities. And God willing, soon enough, a lot of the evacuees are going to be coming back and coming back to their homes and thriving. That's what we're committed to. I wanted to now turn this program back over to David, and we'll get started. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bruce and Adam. Today's presentation was titled by me, What is the Fed Thinking? Inside Look at where the U.S. economy is heading and a glimpse into the Israeli economy. I must say that at the time, this was pre-election. The Fed's thinking at this moment will depend a lot on who the president of the Fed is, and that's quite interesting. But I know that our keynote speaker is going to address that and everything else. During the presentation, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A section that can be found at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get to them. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Elliot Eisenberg, who has insisted that I call him Elliot. Elliot is a JNF donor and a supporter, as well as an internationally acclaimed economist and public speaker, specializing in making economics fun. If you haven't been to his website, it's called Graphs and Laughs. So there you go. That says it all. He's also, from a business perspective, the creator of a multifamily stock index, the first nationally recognized index to track the total return of the public firms that are principally involved in the ownership of multifamily units. He is an established authority on national and global economy and its impact on real estate and more. Elliot, please take the mic and do your stuff.
Wow, thank you for that super warm introduction. I guess I will begin by saying I have been a supporter of JNF since I was about 6 years old. And in my school in Montreal, Jewish People's School in Peretschule, we used to buy like leaves of trees, and the tree I think cost $2.50. This is like, 50 billion years ago. And we'd have competitions who would buy more trees and who would buy more leaves. And I had an allowance, and I'd bring 25 cents and get 2.5 leaves or whatever it was. So you get the idea. It's been in a long time in sticker boxes and so on and so forth. But I got a lot to talk about, so let's go look at some slides. I got to find my slides here. Here we go. Hold on. Give me a sec. Oops. I have to share them first. One sec. Share. And where'd my presentation go? Oh, it's not good. Yeah. I got to find my, hold on 1 second. Here we go. All right. Now I can do it. Let's go back to Zoom here. Pardon me in the technical difficulties. Okay, now I think we're set. So where do I begin? Let's begin by talking about the overall situation here. Look, the economy is pretty good. For a long time, I kept thinking there was a recession lurking somewhere because economic history tells us that a recession is probably lurking whenever the Fed raises rates. But the Fed raised rates a long time ago. The Fed began to cut rates, and the economy continues to chug along pretty well. It's a combination of luck and events and so on and so forth, which we'll get into. But that's why I've crossed out the word so far. I'm as about as happy as I've been. The election's over. There was no trauma because of the election, strife and legal issues and all that stuff. So that's good news. And now we're prancing forward. Let me explain from 30,000 feet why I'm feeling reasonably good. There's some trouble out there. It's not perfect, and we'll get into that too. But the reason we're doing as well as we are is because GDP, as you see here, composed of 4 parts. The first part is C, household consumption. 69% of GDP is strong. We are spending our collective brains out. There's no savings going on. We're just like Taylor Swift, $3,000 tickets. Yeah, let's buy 4. I can't buy here. I'll go to Sweden or whatever it is. I mean, there's an endless demand for stuff. Hotel prices, $1,100, $1,200. People go. So consumer spending, 69% of GDP is okay. And it seems to continue. And there's data revisions, which I'll get into momentarily, which have made it better. The second term is I, corporate investments in plant and equipment. So I would say ho-hum. And the reason it's as good as ho-hum is because of the CHIPS bill, the IRA bill, and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the IIJA. And because of that, there's a tremendous amount of non-res construction going on. And if you have res construction going on, which is not bad, we'll get into that a little bit later, and you've got non-res and you have cars, which we'll get into in a moment, we're not going to have recession, flat out. Those are the 12%. That's the 12% of GDP that's going to drive you in and out of a recession. It's not happening. We'll discuss why and more. But aside of that, it's ho-hum. B is government spending. It's sort of ho-hum now as well. Deficit went up a lot in 2023, fiscal year, calendar year, but hasn't done much in 24. It stayed elevated, unreasonably, highly elevated, but that's a separate conversation. And the last term is exports minus imports, which have gotten a little worse of late because our economy is so good. And because our economy is so good, our interest rates are higher. And because our rates are higher, people want our bonds, and that drives our dollar up and interest rates down, oddly enough. But as a result, it's cheaper to import stuff now than it was, and more expensive for us to export. We'll get into some details on that. Let's look at the details. So the first thing I want to bring up is automobiles. I've already talked about them once, and they're a critically important thing. Because if you look at this graph, the gray vertical bars are recession bars. Notice that on the far left, we had the Paul Volcker double dip recession of the early 80s. In 80 and in 81, 82, a 6-month recession and a 16-month recession. Car sales crashed, no pun intended. Then comes the jobless recovery, the S&L crisis of 1990. Car sales crash again. And then when the Fed raises rates again in 08, 09, car sales crash now. Why haven't they crashed? Because we couldn't get cars in 21 and 22 when COVID was 20 and 21, I guess, when COVID was raging. I mean, look at the graph. Here, it troughs out in May of 2020, and people are dying left, right, and center. I think we wanted to buy a hearse, but they were unavailable, so we tried to get a car. But you get the point. And then we all moved to, Miami or Bozeman, Montana, or somewhere out there, or Boise, Idaho, where there's no public transit. You need a lot of cars up there. And then the supply chain snapped. And now car sales are getting back to normal. And they're about 1 million units almost 16 million units, which is a little bit about a million lower than they used to be at about 17 million units pre-COVID. This is by no means 12, 10, 11, 10 million units. If you don't get car sales collapsing and home sales, new home construction collapsing and commercial consumption collapsing, you're not going to get a recession. Think about it this way. Cars are about 4% of GDP, new cars. New home construction, 4 more. Overall construction, non-res, 4 more. That's about 12% of GDP ballpark. If that falls 20%, you've knocked 2.4% off GDP, and normal GDP growth is 2.5. So that gets you into a recession. But if this doesn't go into recession, you're not going to go into recession. Healthcare doesn't go into a recession. Advanced higher ed doesn't go into recession. K through 12 doesn't go into recession, right? Most of the economy is recession. Government spending is recession resistant. So you have to have a small sector of the economy, the interest sensitive sector, the part that the Fed expects to clobber when they raise rates. It hasn't happened. Cars because of supply chains, new home construction because of people stuck with super low interest rates, and then overall non-res construction because of the IIJA, the CHIPS bill, the IRA bill. So here's overall construction. Look at the story. Compare it to the middle of the graph, 0809, the thick bar, dead center. You can see res construction in red, utterly collapsing. You can see private non-res construction in green, collapsing. You can even see blue, public construction. So that's non-building construction, roads, sewers, police stations, fire stations, broadband, whatever, right? Weakening. But here, look at COVID. And since COVID, there's been no real decline. The weakest thing we're getting is essentially now, where private construction in green is essentially flat, public is barely up, and res construction in red is okay. It's good enough. As long as it doesn't weaken meaningfully, we avoid a recession. So we've had a tremendous amount of luck here. Prior recessions, there have been a couple other times when we've had Fed raised rates in 64, 84, and 94, all years ending in 4, by the way. No recession because of luck. In 64, it was Vietnam. In 84, it was low energy prices. And in 94, the tech boom. If you get luck, you avoid a recession. We have luck. This is a lovely thing. Now, here's single-family construction, which is exceptionally interest rate sensitive. And if you look on the far left, you can see the gray bars coincide with dramatic declines in residential construction activity. But yet, right now, overall, red is single fam. Things really happening. It's kind of bouncing around like a bit like a sine wave or a cosine wave, but nothing really meaningfully happening. Multifam is in the garbage can. It's a temporary problem. It's a collective problem of high cap rates, high vacancy rates, relatively speaking, and low rent appreciation. This is the opposite of what happened 2 years ago when everybody flooded into multifam, and then suddenly the world changed and suddenly it's not so appealing. So what we're going to get into very soon is a shortage of multifamily structure here in the US. There's no question about it, because new starts, multifam starts are really falling rapidly. Output coming on, so finished construction is very high, because we had an overhang from the COVID years when we started to build multifam, but it couldn't come on market because you couldn't get transformers or whatever that prevented the C of O. So multifam is a temporary problem. Single fam is fine. Overall, good enough. Like automobiles, another 4% of GDP doing well. And if you want to look at a more in construction, where's really construction, really motoring heavily, data centers obviously are super, super strong. And manufacturing is very good because of the IIJA, the CHIPS bill, which is the semiconductors, and the misnamed IRA bill, which is encouraging green energy, all kinds of it, whether it's new batteries for electric cars, pulling carbon dioxide out of the air, and all kinds of other stuff, right? So those are very, and you can see it here. Look at the red. The red is manufacturing. It's crazy high because of all this government largesse telling us to build fabs. And these chip plants, you know, they cost $5 billion, $10 billion bucks a piece. This is a relatively expensive endeavor, but they're building a lot of this stuff. So now the notice though, at the very peak, at the top right corner where it's red, it's sort of now lately going nowhere. It's very elevated. It's triple the level it was. It's at 240 billion bucks from 80 billion bucks just before COVID. It's not going to get much higher. It's going to linger there and then begin to come down once the process gets underway. So the boost to GDP, even from these programs, is now, in this case, largely behind us. High, but largely behind us. This is the overall story. This is consumer spending. 69% of GDP. This is where GDP is going to live and die. It's not going to come from corporate investment. We talked about that, and we'll get there in a few minutes more. Government spending, we'll talk about that. There's a lot of stuff going on there because of the election of now President-elect Trump and exports, which don't really matter. But look here, this is an unbelievable line. It's as if COVID never happened. You can take a finger, I joke, take a finger and put it up to your eye and move it over the ditch that's COVID. And there's no COVID because of a combination of very easy fiscal policy, stimulus checks, unemployment insurance, don't pay your rent, don't pay your mortgage, never pay your student loan, and so on and so forth. Unemployment that exceeds income for a lot of people, right? And spending was very strong. And we were home. We had nowhere to go. So we just start to take out our phone and we start buying things. And it hasn't stopped. Our demand for stuff, now we're going away from, before COVID, our consumption of services was here and our goods was there. During COVID, it reversed because you couldn't go anywhere. You went to a restaurant, they breathe all over you and give you COVID and you die. So you didn't want to do that. So you didn't get the hamburger. You didn't get your hair done. You didn't get your teeth done. You didn't do anything, but you bought lots of stuff. Now it's going back to normal. We're going out, rock concerts, hockey games, whatever it is, and less buying a pergola or pavers for our backyard and a Peloton or something. But consumer spending remains remarkably strong. Remarkably strong. This is surprising and pleasant. Now, how strong is it? Can it continue? That's the big question. And this is where I was very nervous. This is the latest data on disposable income. So this is real disposable. This is after taxes and after inflation. If you look at the line pre-COVID from, say, 2014 through 2020, it's a nice straight line. If you extrapolate that line, that's Stimmy Check 1, Stimmy Check 2, Stimmy Check 3, extrapolate the line, you end up somewhere around there, right? It's not that much higher than where we are, but it's a little higher. It's short by about 250 billion bucks. This number was recently revised up by 800 billion bucks. So prior to the revision, we were $1 trillion short of that theoretical spot where we should be, or my cursor is right now, had there been no COVID, had we been on that normal line. My concern was, wow, we're $1 trillion short and spending is really good. Something's got to give. Savings rates can collapse, credit cards, home equity, BNPL, like Klarna, buy now, pay later, and so on. But sometimes it's going to give. But no, this revision has pushed it up. It's still short, but it gets short. And let me explain to you what the revision, where they revised in the revision. So in the revision, they updated dividends and interest, and then corporate profits, both of public firms and private firms. Now, this is important because who gets corporate profits? People own stock. Private profits, you have to own a firm. And interest and dividends, you have to have money in a bank or somewhere, right? Or owning stock or something, right? That's higher income people. So what we see is higher income people now doing much better than we thought that they had the income. I didn't know they had the income as the economist. This explains why they can afford to buy Gucci or Hermes, a Birkin bag, a $25,000 crocodile Birkin bag or something, or a Kelly bag, right? But what was revised down was wages and salaries. And everyone gets wages and salaries, but among poorer people, it's the vast majority of their income. In many cases, their only source of income. They don't get interest and dividends and corporate profits and so on and so forth. So the wealthy have done a little better than we thought, or meaningfully better, and the lower income people a little bit worse than we thought. That's why at the same time that the luxury stuff is doing pretty well, not great, but pretty well, you see Target and Dollar General doing poorly. And McDonald's offering $5 not Happy Meal for kids, but like adult Happy Meals, right? Because they want to bring in people who don't have a lot of money. This bifurcation in our economy is real, I guess is the way to put it. Now, they also revised savings rates up. So until this revision a couple months ago, I saw income being $1 trillion short of where it should be. Now it's only $200 billion short, 250. And savings rates here that are almost 5%, before the revision were about 2.8. It's a huge difference. This suggested our incomes were vastly shortfall in incomes, and we had run down our savings to an incredibly low level, levels only seen in 2003, 4, 5, 6 here with the run up of the housing boom, and then again here right after all the stimmy checks when there was no point savings because the government kept giving us money. But now it's up higher, so there's more gas in the consumption tank. And I think I'm pretty happy as a result of that. This is as happy as I've been, right? Now, what else drove us during COVID, or since COVID kind of ended, was this excess COVID savings. I challenge any of you in the audience here to think about where you spent your vacation in June of 2020. What? Your backyard, your basement, maybe a pool, maybe a park, but you didn't go anywhere. You weren't traveling abroad because the government was everything was closed, right? And you were going to get COVID if you went anywhere fun, so you didn't do anything. But we had lots of money, so we accumulated excess savings. It peaked out at over $2 trillion, it's run down. That helped us too. So when I thought we didn't have income, the wealth income was short and savings was short. Well, we were running out of COVID money, but that's gone now. That wasn't going to help us. But that revision on the disposable income side and the savings rates have made an incredible amount of difference, injecting a lot more money into the spending tank, if you will. The other thing that got me nervous at that time was this blue. Blue is credit card balances. Red is amortizing loans, right? So it's a car loan, a home loan, a boat, a plane. Not many of us have planes, but some do. So you're paying off, 1/360th or 1/240th every month, whatever. But blue is just credit cards. And I got nervous looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, this is a really bad thing. Because whenever credit card balances peak out, this is not the Americans concerned about, oh, I'm paying off my credit card bill. No, it's people can't borrow more money. And what this has turned out to be is lower income people have bumped up against their credit limit and they can't get access to credit. And that's what we're seeing. We're not seeing the upper classes and middle classes and upper classes having credit card trouble. No, it's the lower classes that are having trouble. I'm not thrilled as an economist about this by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm also not saying, oh my gosh, this is going to drive us into the ditch. It won't. But if you look at the graph, you can see here on the far left, 2000, it peaked out, it troughed out, it plateaued, recession. 08, the housing bust, plateaued, recession. It's getting close to plateauing again. So I'm nervous, but much less so because of the income revisions and so on. And now that I understand the graph better. Now, what else is driving us? Well, the stock market and home prices. If you own stock in a home, you're doing fine, thank you. So you can think of America in three different buckets. Not equal size, but three buckets. The left-hand bucket is people that have a home and a stock portfolio. They're doing fine, thank you very much. The second bucket is those with a house but no portfolio, vacant. They're okay because home prices have done very well since COVID. The third bucket is no home, no portfolio. They're not doing that well. They're struggling. And that's why stores that cater to low-end, lower-end households are having trouble, or lower-end and middle-end or something. You look at Walmart. Walmart's doing really well. Why? Because they have low-end, and they've also brought people earning $100,000, $125,000 into the store. They've been successful at grabbing market share. But this graph here shows housing prices, essentially, and stock market. And the stock market's done great. I mean, you think about how our economy has moved since COVID began. You can look at it this way. When COVID came right away, what did we do? We got stimmy checks. The vast majority of us got stimmy checks. When the stimmy checks ended, by the time they ended, what happened? The labor market was really strong. So wages were going up really fast. And then when that ended, we took money out of our house. Maybe some buy now, pay later. I mentioned that earlier, right? And then what happened? The market began taking off like a rocket. So it's been one thing after another, after another. You can think of this as a relay race with a torch being passed from one part of the economy to another, but all of it continuing to keep consumer spending strong. Yeah. Am I marginally concerned about the stock market at the moment? Yeah, I am marginally concerned. PE ratios are like 23, which is a historically very high rate. Expected corporate earnings have come down, and they're now for 25, for calendar 25, and are back where they were about a year ago. So that's not great. And I don't think interest rates fall that much. So higher cap rates are going to put downward pressure on stock market prices. But I digress, right? Now, so that's household consumption, the first term in GDP. Let's look at the second term in GDP. Corporate investment in inventory, plant, and equipment. This is inventory. And I want you to look at the orange color because it's the most important one. It's retail. And the whole supply chain is designed so that when you walk into the store, you can buy a watch, or you can buy a thermos bottle, or a pair of pants, or whatever, a pair of scissors or something, right? Historically speaking, the inventory to sales ratio goes between 1.5 on the far left down to the bottom here in 2012 of 1.35. That's where it lives, between 1.5 and 1 1/3. Pre-COVID, it was 1.45, right in the middle there. Then what happens during COVID? It goes up. The increases we see in the two recessions are mechanical. It's because you have inventory and suddenly your sales collapse. So the months of inventory you have skyrocket. Imagine you have 100 t-shirts in the back of the store and you sell 50 a month, your inventory to sales is 2. But if sales collapse to 25 t-shirts a month, you're at 4. So inventory collapses during COVID. At the worst, it's 1.1. You remember this because you went into a store at that point and you couldn't get toilet paper, Kleenex, paper towels, chicken wings, or anything else. There was nothing to buy. Inflation began to go crazy. We got stimmy checks, inventory to sales collapsed, and then quits start to go crazy, wages start to go crazy, and you just generate all kinds of wild inflation. And then to make it better, the Russians decide to invade Ukraine, jacking up oil prices briefly, but seriously. Since then, look at the bottom now, the orange color. It's gone from 1.1 to 1.32, 1.33, whatever it is. It's almost back to normal again. So we're not going to get any more help from rising inventory. So inventory's out of the way. Now, let's look at firms building plant. You want to build plant? No, you don't want to build plant. Interest rates are high, and this shows you capacity utilization rates. Look where they've gone. They've gone from 81 or 81 and a half down to 77. Why on earth are you going to invest in plant when factory utilization rates are declining? There is no reason on earth. The only reason manufacturing, as I showed you earlier, that red line went from 80 billion to 240 billion was because of government incentives for chips and the IRA bill, the green energy bill, right? Aside of that, it wouldn't be happening because manufacturing's been in a recession for 2 years already. And you see the evidence right here. Who's going to build plant now? Rates are high and you're in a recession and factory utilization, even production is flat since we're at 2017 levels on production levels. So this is not going to help us either. How about buying stuff for your factory? So think of buying laptops and cars, because every firm buys laptops and cars, but more generally, a seamstress buying a sewing machine, Delta buying an airplane, you get the idea. Inflation adjusted is blue. And this is an interesting story because this is the next phase in our economy. Look at blue. It declined for a very long time, right? For years, it's been declining. Well, corresponding with the decline here in the top right corner. Look at now, the last 4 or 5 months, it's bottomed out. That's the point. It's things that made me sad, this deterioration, have now stopped and have now flattened out. Hey, I'm a happier guy all of a sudden. I wouldn't say I'm thrilled out of my mind. This is okay. This is an economy that's going to most likely avoid a recession despite high rates and failures by the Fed and stupid policy decisions and whatever, because things like this graph in blue have bottomed out. And I'm going to show you more graphs where things that were getting worse are getting better. So things that were bad are getting better. Things that were getting worse have stopped getting worse. It's pretty good. Now, the big kahuna. President Trump wins the election. He has 5 policies that he's really put center forward. I mean, there are smaller ones like the proposed secretary-elect, I don't know if you call her that, Linda McMahon of the Education Department, threatening to close down the Education Department. I mean, between you, me, and the lamppost, that doesn't really matter. Education's not a federal government activity. There are 4,400 people who work in the Education Department, so it doesn't really matter. All right, but let's take the 5 things he's talked about seriously and discuss them one by one. Deregulation, the first one. Unambiguously a good thing. I mean, who can be against deregulation? I mean, I don't want 16-year-old, 5-year-old kids working in coal mines, but it's not going to happen. Generally, deregulation is good. More mergers and acquisitions. Banks will be happier. Pharma will have access to money, IPOs and stuff. It's generally a pretty good thing. Don't push it to the extreme. I'm happy. The problem is it takes a long time to have an impact. You don't just deregulate and instantly things happen. Firms have to adjust to the new environment, and this takes time. So you're not going to see massive deflationary impacts because of this, tomorrow morning. It'll take a while. Energy policy is next. And a similar story. The energy policy, I think, generally speaking, is drill, baby, drill. And look, we have lots of energy. It's a shame not to use it, whatever. You're green, you're not green, whatever it is. But let's think about how this is going to manifest itself. If President Trump makes it easier to drill on public lands, which is most likely, right? Firms aren't going to go, oh, wow, we can drill on public lands. Let's do it tomorrow morning. It's not going to happen. You've got to ramp up production. You've got to get rigs there. You've got to get people there and so on and so forth. And the industry has shrunk because labor productivity in the oil fields has skyrocketed. The number of rigs in production being used to drill for oil now is the lowest it's been in decades outside of the collapse of COVID. because everything has gotten better in drilling for oil. I'll give you one example. You can keep drilling further down. They can drill 2 miles, it can drive a mile, mile and a half down. Now, once they've drilled down, they can then drill horizontally 2.5 miles. And then they can turn around and drill 2.5 miles back. So you have 5 miles of drilling you can do from one rig. And then the rig walks to the next place and they drill another hole. You think back 100 years or 50 years ago, you had to hit it dead on to find oil. Now, moreover, what's the price of oil going to be? If it's now like, the WTI, West Texas Intermediate, is in the upper 60s. Brent is at 70. There'll be some production, but this depends a lot on what happens going forward. The U.S. is producing record amounts of oil, more than Russia, more than anybody in the whole world, Saudi Arabia. Canada's producing more oil. Brazil's producing more oil. And Guyana's producing a lot of oil. Oddly enough, Guyana. Yeah, I know, no one knew, but Guyana, on the road to 1 million barrels a day. They'll be a relatively large producer of oil. And China's economy is weakening for a whole bunch of reasons. Electric cars, less oil, teaching less oil, and less growth, less oil. So we're swamped in oil. If OPEC, and they've promised to ramp up production by a couple million barrels a day, if they increase production, prices will fall. They're not going to do any pumping of drill, baby, drill. Now, if Trump is able to squeeze Iran very hard, as he says he has, and Iran production falls by a couple of million barrels a day, that might give us an opportunity. But this energy policy, as you see, is somewhat nebulous and hard to know. Oil prices, Iran, it's complicated. It's not going to be immediate. Now, tax cuts, the third thing. I'm skeptical here. Back in 16, when Trump won re-election, became president in 17, and he cut taxes in 18, 17 for calendar year 18, or maybe for 19, I don't remember anymore. He had a 47-seat majority in the House of Representatives. We don't know the final composition of the Congress because there's still one seat that still remains to be seen. If the Democrats win that seat, there's been no change. The Democrats will have picked up one seat. If the Republicans get that seat, it'll be the identical composition as it was in the last Congress, 221 to 214. With a 5-seat majority in the House of Representatives, President Trump will have a much harder time getting taxes cut. Moreover, the deficit's much higher, the debt's much higher, interest rates are much higher, and interest expenses on debt service are much higher. This is a much more difficult environment to get it passed. I'm not saying he won't do it, but it'll be harder because we can't afford to blow out the debt and deficit like we did in 17, because interest costs are now almost $1 trillion a year. They're on a par now with defense spending. Now we get to the two big things he's talking about: tariffs and immigration. And those are things he can both do by executive order right off the bat, like he can do with deregulation as well. Energy policy is much more complicated, and tax cuts require Congress directly. But tariffs and immigration he can do just with EOs on the first day he's in office. And it depends what he does here. This is a big unknown. Immigration policy would be a shock to the system. You lose 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people, we can get by. You lose 4 or 5 million people, this is a lot. And it would be relatively sudden. Oh, it wouldn't be sudden because it's going to take court orders and battles and this and that. It's not going to happen overnight. But this is something to be aware of. This is going to cause inflation to rise. It's going to cause wages to go up and so on. There'll be a shortage of workers. Politically, this may be a great thing. I'm not going there, right? But economically, I'm a little concerned. It's a matter of how much he does here. It isn't just tariffs or immigration, yes or no. It's a continuum of a lot or a little. If Trump says, 1 million, we get a million immigrants out, okay, fine. And he can get some out easily because there's some have waivers, right? The Venezuelans, the Haitians, the Ukrainians, those he can throw out easily because they're here because of our good graces. We've given them permission, and now we terminate the permission. That's okay, right? That's what politicians do. But it should have a mild deleterious effects on inflation, nothing particularly profound. But if he gets towards the upper, 5, 6, 7 million, now I'm really starting to focus very intensely on this. This would be an inflationary shock. Now, tariffs, who knows what he's going to do? Is it a negotiating strategy? Is it something he's determined to do? Will he really impose 60% tariffs on China and 10% or 15% on allies and stuff? Or is it just talk to get them to increase defense spending or swing a deal? I don't know. But again, tariffs are going to be inflationary. So these two policies he has, tariffs and immigration, are both have an inflationary bias towards them. And that bias is going to give the Fed a little bit of concern. And that's why we're seeing interest rates not go down. There's that plus the enthusiasm of Trump and the idea of tax cuts and deregulation boosting. So we're going to have better growth and higher inflation. And the Fed's going to go, I'm not so sure. We're going to get to the Fed in a few minutes, but bear with me. Now, trade. This is our actual trade over the last, 25, 30 years. Blue is exports, and you can see in the top right corner, they're going up, but not as fast as imports in green. As a result, our trade deficit is deteriorating, and that's going to pull down a little bit of GDP. I mean, nothing profound, but a little bit of GDP, right? Now, what I want to draw your attention to understand the trade deficit in much more detail is look at the middle of the graph, the thick blue, the thick gray line. That's the housing bust of 08, 09. It was an 18-month recession. And in the middle of that trade, our trade deficit shrank dramatically from roughly 65 billion, 60 billion a month to about 20, 25 billion a month, whatever the numbers are. Why? Why? What happened? Our house prices were collapsing and unemployment was skyrocketing. What caused it to go down? What caused it to go down was savings. U.S. savings rates went way up. Our financial condition was steadily deteriorating. We were nervous as all get up, and we began to save money. Why do the Chinese run a trade surplus? Because they save like the blazes. We don't save. We run a trade deficit. They save. They run a trade surplus. The trade deficit is an outcome of investment and savings decisions undertaken by firms and households. If firms and households increase savings, our deficit will go down. If households and firms increase investments, our deficit will rise. The deficit is an outcome. It's a symptom of something else. Keep that in mind. And this shows it to you. This 0809 example shows you that it can move quickly if behavioral changes, household financial behavioral changes occur. And they occurred big time back then because the situation was so grave. Now, I want to change gears and look at a whole bunch of data, 4 or 5 pieces of data, that things have gotten much better. Here, this is leading economic indicators. Look how low they got. They got to almost -10. And what happened since then? It's pretty much shot up. So it was terrible at -10. If you look at -10 and you move left, you see recession, 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 recession. But -5, you still see a lot of recession, but you get to -2, we're over. So this is, again, I showed you before, spending on capital goods. It bottomed out in blue and it bottomed out. Okay, that's pretty happy. This is same thing. Things are getting better. I'm happier. Here's another one. Banks lending for C&I. The higher it is, the more difficult it is to lend. The lower it is, the easier lending conditions are. They were very tight. Now they're back to zero. That's better. They get below the x-axis, I'll really get happy. So again, the direction of travel here again, positive and correct. This is a graph about delinquencies. And there was concern here, but not so concerned. The yellow is mortgage debt. It's back to normal where it was pre-COVID. Okay, no big deal. It was artificially reduced because of moratoria and so on and so forth, and that's over. Okay, now let's look at the more serious ones. Credit cards. Well, first they peaked out. They're now coming down from 9%, which is very high. They're coming down. Who's not paying? We know. It's lower income people with lower FICO scores that were given credit cards in 21 that shouldn't have gotten the credit cards, but their FICOs were looked good because of excess savings and stimmy checks and so on and so forth. And they got banks lent to them and they were sorry. So that's a small segment. It's a problem, but nothing big. Now, look at autos. The autos really drove me into insanity. This was something I was up late at night struggling over and thinking about. It wasn't counting sheep. It was thinking about auto loan defaults. What's going on there? The story turns out to be not all that nefarious. What's going on is there's some buyer's remorse. People bought expensive cars during 21, used cars. They couldn't have, that the car breaks, they send the car back. But it's more strategic defaulting on autos. People have an asset that's worth this, and the mortgage is worth this, and they default. In 08, 09, and 10, 11, people strategically defaulted on their houses because the mortgage was above the value of the asset. And now they're doing with cars. And it's happening more because used car prices are falling very rapidly because we're stocked up in cars. So used car prices, so you're becoming more and more upside down on the car. And therefore, you just strategically default out, buy a clunker for a year, and then buy a new car in a year or two. So these 3 things are explainable, understandable, and not all that bad. The reason I'm getting more optimistic is the yield curve. The yield curve is the relationship between time and money. and it's gotten less inverted. It went from very inverted to mildly inverted. It's now on the x-axis. So we're okay on that one. So that's good too. And here's GDP growth. Not all that bad. 24, 25 is going to be 2.4, 2.5, 2.3, a little bit lower, but nothing nefarious. Labor markets are where I'm most concerned. Look here. Unemployment rates going up. If you look in the past, when unemployment goes up, it tends to cause a recession. That's why I want you to focus on the unemployment rate and labor markets. Next, look at quit rates. They're drastically coming down. They're not low. They've come down a lot, but they're not low, but they're getting low. You see here in this recession here, post 2000 dot-com bust, they fell to 1.7. They're now at 1.9. This is the percentage of the labor force quitting their job every month. It's getting a little low. Workers are not going to be happy with this. This is monthly job growth. Ignore the last month because it had the Boeing strike and two hurricanes. But it's weakening the last 5-6 months at about 100, 150,000 a month. Stays there, we're okay. It gets lower, we're nervous. And that's why the Fed's lowered rates. Now, why is the unemployment rate rising? It's not because people are getting fired. Look at the graph at the bottom. Blue's a little low earlier in the year, a little below the average, still higher after much. So this is not going up because people are getting fired. Firms are not firing workers, but they're also not giveaway. Here, no one's getting hired. You see it here. That's the issue. Labor growth, pay raise growth is declining, letting the Fed lower rates. Labor productivity in red is spectacularly good, and that is enabling the Fed to lower rates because it's deflationary. More luck. We've had a lot of luck. Houses, cars, labor productivity, and so on. Now, what's the Fed going to do? And then we'll wrap it up. So, is there inflation? Yeah, there's inflation. Hello, there's inflation. Now, not because of oil. Oil prices have been flat for the last couple of years, with the exception of the Russian invasion of Ukraine that moved momentarily. This is CPI. CPI is becoming much more tranquil, but it peaked out at 9.1 in mid-22. Headline is now 2.5, but core is 3.2 and not falling. So the Fed's getting nervous that unemployment is not coming down. The Trump election may cause inflation. GDP's holding up very well, thank you very much. Unemployment fell from 4.3 to 4.1. It's going up, but it fell recently. So the Fed's going to say to itself, let's wait and see, because we don't know what Trump's going to do. If he does a lot of tariffs and a lot of immigration, kicking people out, oh, that's going to drive inflation up. Maybe he won't. We'll see. So what's the Fed done? The Fed dropped rates we see here on September 19 by 0.5 percentage point. They dropped it by 1/4 point again. And they'll drop it by 1/4 point now next couple of weeks in the next meeting in December, or they're going to cut them at the end of January, somewhere, I think, one cut. And then they're going to sit back and wait and see what Trump does with executive orders and make their decisions after that. But right now, the economy's overperforming. Unemployment's not falling. Unemployment's not getting worse. GDP growth is solidly stable. And Q3 will be revised up to 3% from 2.8. Last but not least, what else is lucky? A friggin' money supply. Look how low it fell. It fell to negative 10%. Should have caused a recession. It didn't. You just look at the top corner. It went up 25%. Money supply goes up 25%. Everybody refinances everything they own. And now you're protected against interest rate hikes. So the economy benefited a lot from a tremendous amount of luck. Autos and housing, labor productivity, money supply. And now economic conditions are turning around. It all depends on what Trump does, especially with immigration policy and tariffs. 25 should be a decent year. I think the first half is not that great. Growth slows a little bit, but all else equal, it improves at that point. The Fed will cut rates. How much more, we don't know. I would assume at least 100 basis points or 1 full percentage point of cuts. The rest really will depend on Trump and what he does. Job growth probably stays at around 100, 125,000 for the foreseeable future. If it stays there, we're fine. Inflation decelerates a little more because of the way rents are measured and insurance costs. Lastly, watch unemployment. It's the single most important thing. If it weakens, all bets are off. The Fed lowers rates. Now, quickly on the Israeli economy. I don't want to get into it in too much detail, but here's the basic story. GDP in Israel has recovered to where it was pre-war, about $520 billion or $530 billion. But on a per capita basis, Israel's GDP has fallen by about 7, 9, 10%, about 9, 10%. This is a very, very large decline. The amount of companies struggling in Israel is meaningful. Small businesses, these guys are having a tough time right now. They really are. Tourism, which is not a big percentage of Israel's GDP, nonetheless, has been totally hammered, right? But a 10% decline in GDP on a per capita basis is large. We experienced a 2% decline in COVID and a 2% decline in the 08-09 recession. So this is 4 or 5 times as bad as what we experienced, and we thought that was really tough. Going forward, Israel has several very large strategic issues they must solve. They must solve them. Their labor productivity in Israel is very low. Outside of the high IT sector, where it's very, very good, it's pretty crummy. Construction and so on, these are very low levels of labor productivity compared to the US. They have to get labor productivity up. They have to get the amount of capital per worker up to get that labor number up. And the other large strategic problem that they've got is employment numbers, percentages among the Haredi men and among Arab women. They're too low. Among Arab women, it's been going up. Among Haredi men, it has not been going up. But they have to get these both higher. They want to have a good economy, a bigger economy, more GDP and so on, and more wealth for a whole bunch of reasons, including defense. And they're going to need more defense. They're going to have an extra division now up in the Golan and so on and so forth, and maybe in the Gaza envelope. This is going to cost money. They're going to need bigger GDP and tax revenue to do it. But they've got to get Haredi men, Arab women, and labor productivity up in the long run, and they have suffered a large economic shock. This is my name. This is my cell number, Twitter handle, website, email address. I put out 70 words on the economy 5 days a week. No graphs, no ads, no charts, no links, no photos. If you want to hear from me every day, text the word bow tie, one word, to the 5-digit number 66866. You'll be prompted for an email address. You'll hear from me every day till you die. Do
Elliot,
hell, you'll hear from me there too. Yes.
that was amazing. Some people have been texting me or whatever, chatting me to say, is there a recording of this? And the answer is yes. This will be made available to everybody. And this way you don't have to scramble and write down Elliot's home phone number and whatever else he's provided to you in that last slide. That was a lot to digest, and we haven't gotten that many questions in because I think people are trying to digest it all. I'm going to synthesize in just one question, which we'll make time for just one question. So the topics that I've been hearing from, I'm going to consolidate. You said, and I try to write it down, you were only marginally concerned about the stock market. So I'm going to ask you, what are you mostly concerned about from the following list? Crypto, the bankruptcy of Chinese home builders, the fact that the ballooning U.S. debt is greater than GDP, or the U.S. housing crisis because home prices continue to soar and there aren't enough residential units. Pick one and address it, if you wouldn't mind.
Crypto is kind of fun. And it's on everybody's mind, right? I mean, I'm not worried, enthusiastic, or afraid of crypto. I think that's the honest way to look at it. I think of crypto as becoming something like gold. It's some store of value, it's some protection, it's got some pleasant variation, and the variation in price alone makes it very appealing and very sexy, right? But the key thing is, if banks were lending against the crypto, then I'd be nervous about banks having trouble if crypto collapsed and fell to 25,000 a coin, for example, right? But by best evidence, I don't see that happening. So crypto goes up, hey, we're happier, we have a little more money and so on. In the short run, my concern is more, has President Trump's victory really changed the value of crypto by 50%? Seems like a lot. I mean, yeah, there'll be deregulation, and crypto will certainly benefit, and more people will be able to buy it. Not sure that's exactly an increase in demand that's sufficient to justify the increase. But that having been said, so hey, I mean, gold's up at almost $3,000 an ounce too. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, one way or the other.
Okay, so it's something to invest in. It might be fun. It may not be the future of funds.
So I think on that front, I mean, I'm not a financial advisor. I haven't passed my Section 7 or Section 48 or 116. Don't sue me. But if you want to put, I wouldn't put 25% of my net worth in Bitcoin. If you want to put 1% or something to diversify, like gold a little bit and silver a little bit and somewhere, yeah, sure, why not?
Okay, I'm going to wrap up here. If you don't want to put 1% in crypto, please feel free to direct 1% to JNF. I think that's could be possibly a better investment long term. I want to thank you, Elliot. That was fabulous. A lot to digest, but really thoughtful and obviously very thoughtfully presented. I want to thank everyone for taking time during your middle of your day or beginning of your day to participate. We're very excited to launch this new national real estate program. I want to encourage you all to seriously consider joining us with a minimum gift of $1,800 annually. If you currently are give more than that, we appreciate that also. I'm pleased to announce that there is going to be an upcoming real estate focused mission to Israel sometime in 2025. You will be contacted with more information about that. And lastly, I really want to hear from all of you. Was this program what you had expected it to be? What topics can we be bringing you in the future that are equally interesting, more about Israel, more about the U.S. economy, more real estate specific? So you'll be receiving a survey in the next few days, just a half a dozen questions. Please take the time to fill it out. That's all I got. Wrapping up from here in the south of Israel. I wish you all I also want to thank all of JNF staff that contributed heavily to pulling this event together. Sarah, Deb, Gabrielle, everyone else, Yuval. Thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you. Have a great day. My thoughts are with all of us for peace in the near term and prosperity for all of us long term.